Hey, this is Rick Stewart again. This video I want to do on King Tut, the infamous King Tut. And you can see here, I'll just start with this page here, and you can this is what, if you go and look up King Tut on the internet, you'll find, these are more or less the images you will find for King Tut. And here's some paintings of King Tut, and sort of the same. It's pretty much that same image over and over again, but as you can see, it's fairly whitewashed. I don't see anyone here that is certainly not a black or Negro image of Pharaoh. Now here's a image of Pharaoh. This is the actual King Tut from his actual tomb. This is a statue of himself with the gold, and you can see that he's African, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. And they call it the guard statue, but really you can see with the headdress and everything else that it really is an image of King Tut. This is what you'd see if you go look up a mural, because there's murals that were done found in his tomb, and check out these. This is called whitewashing. This is what whitewashing is, to make it, But this is actually what it actually appears as. So they were African. King Tut was African, right? And it's sad that after all this time, that the Egyptologists, and not all, but most of the Egyptologists, they're still stuck in the colonial period, where we can't accept the fact that the pharaohs, all the way up until they started being conquered, the people, that the pharaohs were black, and their armies were black, and they were black. And I just find it very shocking that we can't get to that point where we can accept the fact that they are. I've got some great channels that I want to go over. So one of my subscribers mentioned that I should take a look at this King's Monologue presenter, and excellent stuff. And if you want to go take a look, I'm going to show a little bit of one of his videos, and I think it's well worth watching. I'm only going to show a very small clip of it, and if you want to go see the rest, I will leave the link down below in the description.
King Tutankhamun is easily one of the most recognizable names of the ancient world. But in spite of being one of the most portrayed individuals in ancient history, the true appearance of this new kingdom ruler has remained a mystery to the general public. His intact tomb was discovered by archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922. This novel find uncovered a treasure trove of pristine relics and artwork. Included in this archaeological jackpot were close to 400 portrayals of the young king. However, in spite of uncovering the most comprehensive collection of life-size statues, statuettes, mannequins, sculptures, jars, chests and thrones, all depicting the young king, these portraits are cumulatively ignored by the experts, who instead opt to bypass the artistic and scientific data in favor of appeasing the sensibilities of Eurocentrism and modern Arabism that continue to dictate the tropes of Egyptology. Notable pieces include the head of Nefertim, portraying the king in his youth, his famous wooden mannequin, a life-size depiction of the young king in vivid and realistic color. We also have the golden throne, one of the few relics to have preserved full color and detail without degradation. Not to mention multiple statues and shwabtis, all bearing the same striking features, albeit at different stages in the young king's life. There is an important detail on all of the life-size depictions of the king that complements the consistent use of dark tones that lie between a dark reddish chocolate brown and a deep black to depict him. The careful detailing of reddening of the sclera in the eyes is a common trend used in his art, which intensified in his older portraits. This is significant because it is a unique condition linked to a buildup of melanin in continental African populations. NewHealthAdvisor.org states,
Most Africans have high levels of melanin that results in yellow eyes. Melanin determines the color of your skin, sclera and eyes. When this concentration increases, the eye color becomes light yellow or muddy brown.
The Kemetic artist carefully captured this uniquely African trait in many portraits of the young king, placing him exclusively amongst the heavily melanated African populations. But that isn't all. In support of his portraits, the young king's body possesses a uniquely regional physiognomy that paint an unambiguous mosaic of his ethno-cultural origins. Do we have enough information to infer which ethnic group or groups he may lay closest to? Let's explore this.
This channel, Smash Rockwell, has brought together 10 experts speaking about the fact that the ancient Egyptians, were black. And I'm just going to put a couple of those here for you to watch.
First off, the Egyptians, of course, were African, and we have evidence from Herodotus and other sources that Africans tended to be black, that they were a range of colors that would constitute black today, and they were actually, the Greek words that are used for them is black.
I can sympathize with the impulse to sort of to be very strident, to be very argumentative, to be very certain, to act very certain about the blackness of the ancient Egyptians, because for the longest time, the very longest time, there was this prevailing idea that black is Africa and Africa is less than, right? That no matter what happens, no matter how you cast it, anytime you fall on the wrong side of that dividing line between black and not black, even not between black and white, whatever's coming from that black side is going to be less than. And it took people being willing to challenge that orthodoxy, and sometimes in a very ill-informed way, right? Sometimes, it just took people coming up and going, I feel like this, and so I'm going to say it and make it right. And it turns out they actually were in some ways, right? Because now we can look at Egypt and say the ancient Egyptians are an African civilization. These are people that, by and large, we probably would have looked at and thought, oh, these are black people.
I think that the further back in history you go, the blacker the Egyptians are. And by black, I don't merely mean dark skin, but also with other Negro characteristics.
Yeah, is very real. He's got some excellent videos that he's doing. I think he's going to end up doing 10 videos. It's called 100 Proofs that the Egyptians and Hebrews were black. And he's done three so far. So one that's 1 to 10, one that's 11 to 20, and one that's 21 to 30. And excellent, very well done. And I'm just going to put a clip from his video channel. If you want to see the whole video, I'll again leave the link down below.
Number 2, Kush. One of the earliest regions mentioned in the Bible is Kush, located in what is now Sudan, along the Nile River. The Kushites are historically documented as a powerful, advanced, and undeniably black African civilization. The Bible identifies Kush as a descendant of Ham, one of Noah's sons, further reinforcing the African origins of some of the earliest people mentioned in Scripture. I'm sure we've all heard the racist, Eurocentric Christian doctrine that all black people are descendants of Ham, and we'll speak more on that stupidity later. Number 4, Mizraim, Ham's son. So we all agree that Ham was a black man, even the racists. This means that his sons would have been black also. We know that one of his sons, Cush, was 100% black, which would make Cush's brothers black. Mitzrayim is one of Cush's brothers. Mitzrayim, or Misr, is Egypt. So the progenitor of Egypt descends from a black man, Ham, which means the original ancient Egyptians were black.
Distance from the forehead to the back of the skull is long in relation to the overall height of the cranium, and that's something that you see quite frequently in certain populations, one of which is ancient Egyptians. Another would be black African groups in certain populations, one of which is ancient Egyptians. Another would be black African groups.
Ancient Egyptians, black African groups.
In a study of 2,861 Egyptian skulls spanning the pre-dynastic and all dynasties, well over 95% of Egyptian skulls were classified as dolichocephalic. Strong dolichocephaly is typical of southern Nilotic African populations, such as the Kalenjin and Maasai, whose cephalic index of 73% is virtually identical to that of the ancient Egyptians. Yet this index is so far from the norms of Eurasian brachycephalic skulls that they would be considered a deformity within such populations.
Cush and Mitzrayim are brothers from the same father and mother, so there's no way to get past this. Sorry. So we know that Egypt is a brother of Cush, but for some reason they want us to believe that the Egyptians were either white or Arab, completely ignoring the fact that one of the main reasons Egypt looks the way it does today is because of multiple invasions by Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Hittites, Assyrians, and many more. We know the truth. The Israelites in Egypt. Let's talk about the Israelites as a whole when they were in Egypt. Specifically, let's talk about the death of Jacob, also known as Israel. After Israel died, Joseph pleaded to the household of Pharaoh to bury his father in the land of Canaan due to an oath he made with his father, along with his brothers' households and his father's household, according to Genesis 58. Pharaoh agreed, and the Israelites traveled from Goshen to the land of Canaan to bury their father and mourn. I want you to read Genesis 50:11. For the fifth time, I repeat, for the fifth time, why are all the Israelites being mistaken for Egyptians? Why do Israelites who are Semites keep being mistaken for a Hamitic people? In this verse, we have proof that all members of the house of Israel were being mistaken for Egyptians by the Canaanites. Moses was mistaken for an Egyptian by the Midianites and was adopted by an Egyptian family. Paul was mistaken for an Egyptian by the Romans. Joseph could not be differentiated from the Egyptian population he was ruling over. Yahushua and his family hid amongst the Egyptians while escaping from Herod, and now we have all of the Israelites being mistaken for Egyptians by the Canaanites. This is exactly why they do not want you to believe the ancient Egyptians were black, even though Mizraim was a brother of Cush. They do not want you to believe the ancient Egyptians were black, because by implication, that would make the Israelites black also. Remember this. You now have 5 biblical examples of the Israelites and the Egyptians looking similar, a Semitic and a Hamitic population that look alike.
A quick question. How familiar are you with the ancient Egyptian race controversy? Well, I would argue that unless you've been living under a rock, if you've ever been confronted or even interested in the civilization of ancient Egypt, you will be confronted with this controversy. The question being, were they black, were they white, or were they something in between? Well, one thing that you might be surprised to know is that this debate was actually closed about 20 years ago. And this was in a study that no one ever talks about. So let's have a look at that together. The story of how this debate was ended actually begins with this man. This is Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, and he was a Senegalese/French anthropologist. And he came up with a very, very smart idea. He essentially said, give me a small proportion or sample of the skin of one of the mummies, and I can test for melanin density. And this took place in the 1970s. And if you don't know, depending on how deficient or dense your melanin is going to dictate whether or not you're light-skinned or effectively dark-skinned. So if we know what complexion the ancient Egyptians were, we essentially know what race they were. Now, as you can imagine, his petitions to the Marriott Museum didn't yield any success. However, fast forward 30 years to the year 2005, and this doctor here, Dr. Anna Maria Makota, was essentially undergoing an investigation where it was her job to figure out the way to rehydrate the dehydrated mummified tissue so they could perform pathological tests such as genetics and biological tests successfully on mummified remains. And during her investigation, she discovered that the basal epithelial cells were packed with melanin as expected for specimens of Negroid origin. Now, to be clear, she ran these tests on nearly 300 Egyptians from Thebes in Upper Egypt. They were absolutely of the nobility, and they were part of an Upper Egyptian royal family and 300 of them. So this was in the Middle Kingdom. So this is a huge sample set that we have here of actual bona fide definite Egyptians, and we have confirmation that according to complexion, they were black.
You have spent much of your life studying the history of the ancient Egyptians. Who were the ancient Egyptians? How did they look?
Voici le premier roi de la terre.
Here you have the first king of the earth, the very first. And the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, looked like this man.
De la race noire plus marquée que celle de presque tous ceux qui sont ici dans cette salle.
You can see that he has those traits that are associated with the black
feature.
Those features associated with the black race, which are even more pronounced than many of the people here. It was this man who unified the Nile Valley from Upper to Lower Egypt, and this was 3,300 years before Jesus Christ.
Yes. Déjà d'après ses traits, et les traits aussi des pharaons qui vont suivre.
You can see by his features and those of the pharaohs and kings that will follow it, you can see that they were not a people that were started as whites and became progressively more black.
Mais
they were instead a black people, an authentic black people, but which never ceased to be blacks.
Donc, attendez, je dis en un mot. Donc, vous voyez que les anciens Égyptiens étaient des Noirs comme tous les autres naturels de l'Afrique, c'est tout.
You can see that the first the Egyptians were black men, like black men that you see in Africa now.
I hope you've enjoyed these clips from these great, very, very well done presenters, and I hope you'll go and check out their channels. But as for me and my house, or at least for me, there's no doubt that the early Egyptians, all the way through Abraham's time, all the way through Moses' time, they were black, Negro, they were African. And I'm going to do another video on the Hebrews and how that relates to why we feel the need to make the Egyptians white, and they aren't. You know, now they are. The people that are in Egypt now are more white or Arab, and that's because of a lot of migrations, as they spoke about. Anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this. I love this subject. It's so fascinating, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Take care now. Bye.